So, I have 22 books to talk about. I always expect the next book I read to be the best book I read. 20 years, is it 20 years? 20 years. They drink too much, they party too much. Here's why it's on my list. Off the Rails Crazy Town. So this one takes place in an isolated setting in Ireland. My favorite videos of 2022, my favorite books, 2022. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse, and welcome to my best of 2022 video. So finally we are here, and if you guys have been following me, then you will have seen that I did, or hopefully you will have seen, I don't want to assume anything. I did a best debuts I read in 2022, my favorite rereads of the year, and my favorite new to me authors for this year. And a few of those people will cross over from those three lists into today's list. But for the most part, I would say I didn't have a hard time picking these 22 books, but it's solely because I did those other three videos. Because I think I read 119 books. Goodreads is saying 120, so there's a discrepancy in the force somewhere. I'm pretty sure I probably marked one book that I read it twice. So anyway, that's a story for a different day. My book journal says I read 119 books, the most I've ever read in a year before. And it was hard to narrow it down, but I'm very excited about the list. So let's dive in. These are in no particular order because you guys, it's hard enough for me to just pick some favorites. Don't make me force rank them. So we're gonna do this in two parts because it's 22 books and that's a lot of books to talk about. So today we are gonna zoom into part one, but I'm filming it all at once. So tomorrow part two will be up. So here we go. Let's get into the books I loved. The first book I want to talk about is My Summer Darlings by May Cobb. And I just loved this book. So I read The Hunting Wives last year. I became a huge fan of May Cobb, and her books are set in Texas, and they give me that sort of desperate housewives, rich people behaving badly, rich people problems kind of a vibe. And I just love them. I just absolutely love them. I love her characters. And this book has a little bit of a Witches of Eastwick feel to it. So there are three best friends living in Texas, and they all have their own baggage and complications. And a mysterious stranger moves to town and he sort of upends things for the ladies. So they are grown women, married, divorced, kids, the whole nine. They drink too much, they party too much. So I've started a habit of putting a Post-it note in the front of my book so I know when I read it, and sometimes I take a couple of notes. So I read this over the summer. I read this in July. It was perfect. It was just like hot, steamy Texas kind of a vibe. And this is why it's on the list. These are the notes I wrote on my Post-it. Off the Rails Crazy Town, boozing, steamy, frenemies, lusty, new man in town, and everyone wants a piece, husbands be damned. So if you're looking for a delicious book to just binge and have fun with, this is your one. This is your book. Read this book. The next book I have is one I talked about in a previous video, and it's The Pact by Sharon Bolton, and it absolutely deserves its spot on the best of list. This is the first book I read by her, despite having several, and I'm hooked. I'm totally hooked on her writing. This is one of my favorite tropes where we have a co-ed group of friends who did some bad stuff in the past, and then we fast forward 20 years, and it comes back to haunt them. So this one has a little bit of like In My Dreams vibes, a little bit of If We Were Villains vibes. So it is 6 friends. They are seniors in high school. This is set over in the UK, and they are playing a daredevil game that goes horribly wrong. And one of the girls in the group admits or accepts blame for the group for the things that have gone wrong in exchange for the fact that when she's released from prison, she is going to ask each of the other 5 friends for a favor. And everyone's like, sure. 20 years later, she gets out of prison and she comes asking for a favor. So this book totally took me by surprise on all fronts. It was just wonderfully dark, so many great twists. I really liked the writing style. It was disturbing, it was messy, it was perfect. And the idea of sort of consequences of your choices and questions around why this woman would accept blame for something. And I just loved it so much. So I will definitely be reading more Sharon Bolton in 2023. Mark my words. Also just ordered her newest book. If you're in the mood for something a little bit lighter, but wholly amazing and entertaining and funny and smart and witty and brilliant. Give You Fool Me Once by Ashley Winstead. I loved this. So I warned you guys that when I talked about it in my dreams, it was not the last time we were going to hear Ashley Winstead in my videos, and here she is. This is her romance debut, which came out earlier in the year, and I obviously loved In My Dreams last year when I read it. I reread it this year, and this book took me by such surprise. So I wound up getting the audiobook from my library when it first came out, like popped in the earbuds, went for a walk, and I think I made it to the end of the block because it's like the first page of the book had a line in it, and I like was dying and was like, did she just say what I think she just said? Like, rewind, rewind, rewind. Yes, she just said what I think she said. Started laughing out loud again. I'm sure everyone in my town thinks I'm a lunatic. And proceeded to listen to it the entire walk, came home and bought the book because I had to have it. I loved this. It's just, it is a lovers to enemies to lovers book. We are also set in Texas, coincidentally, with My Summer Darlings, words, but nothing like My Summer Darlings. So in this book, we are following a woman named Lee Stone, and she is a 21st century woman. She is a communications director. She kicks butt at work, and then in her off time, she is affectionately referred to as Stoner. She drinks the guys under the table. She has fun. She's not looking for love. She's just out for a good time, and she has plenty of good times. And she had had a relationship that ended very, very badly in grad school with a guy named Ben. And in the best sort of lovers to enemies to lovers kind of a book, Ben winds up coming to Texas and they wind up having to work together. And it's just so fun. So it definitely gives me Emily Henry vibes, Christina Lauren vibes. There are weightier moments, there are hysterical moments. It's a little bit steamy and definitely laugh out loud funny. And I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. So another book, a companion novel, is coming out early in 2023. So not a sequel, but another character from this book gets their own character, which I'm super excited about. But if you're reading Ashley Winstead but have not picked up her romance in this case, do it. You won't be sorry. I'm all about being bossy today and I don't mean to be, so sorry. Just want everybody to read these books. The next book I have is Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney. So this is Alice Feeney's version, for lack of a better word, of Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. And it is also one of three books, fingers, with an And Then There Were None inspo to it because I just love it so much. So this book takes place on sweet, sweet Nana's 80th birthday. It is Halloween night. And Nana lives in this isolated house on this isolated island where when the tide comes in, you are completely cut off from everyone and everything. And she invites her family to come celebrate her birthday, which they do. And in a very And Then There Were None vibe, when midnight strikes, somebody is dead and they are not the last. So we have the whole family there. We're trying to figure out who done it and what's going on. And it's just my favorite trope. I say that so many times. So many tropes are my favorite. It is one of my go-tos. If I know that there's an And Then There Were None vibe to a book, I am picking it up immediately, no questions asked. And it was great. So I did talk about this when I first reviewed the book back in, I put a post-it and everything, October. So I actually wound up getting spoiled for something in this book by somebody's review, which 1000% clouded my experience reading it. So I do feel like my experience is a little bit hard to, not decipher, but like, I don't know if I would have the same feelings if I didn't know the thing at the beginning, like if I didn't know the spoiler, but I really enjoyed it. And it definitely changed my reading experience, but at the same time, I'm a huge fan of Alice Feeney. I have read all but one of her books, and this story surprised me in a lot of ways because it was much more emotional than I had expected it to be. And there were a lot of little nuggets about kind of life and experience and just so many, I don't even know how to describe it without, I have a hard time talking about this book because A, I don't want to be that person who ruined it for me. And B, I feel like so much of what I loved about this book gives things away in the book. So Nana herself is a writer and she wrote children's books called Daisy Darker, and Daisy is her granddaughter. So there are some nuggets about the writing life, which I feel I really connected to, but there's a lot of feelings of, this isolated house, of isolation, of loneliness. And I wound up crying during this book too, which also surprised me. I don't often cry during a thriller, but it really just was so well done. And I feel like I wrote lessons about life and grief and living. But I loved it so much. And I feel like this is one of those books where either you're all in or you're not. And I'm somebody who was all in. So I really, really enjoyed it. I think she's just such a spectacular writer and will continue to read anything that she writes. Another book that I talked about before but absolutely deserves its spot here today is Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. I loved this. This is an enemies to lovers. It is so freaking funny. The audiobook of this is tremendous. So we have Luke and Oliver. Luke is the son of a rock star. He's had some bad press. He's made some bad choices. He's had some problems with addiction. He needs to fix his reputation. And then we have Oliver, who is a barrister, who is kind of stuffy and proper, and he needs a fake boyfriend for his own reasons. So a mutual friend hooks them up. And they have met before. They did not get on well the first time they met each other. And round 2 is full of all sorts of hijinks and laughter. And I just loved it so much. And again, this is a book that carries some weightier subject matter in it. There's such an outstanding cast of supporting characters from friends and family and coworkers. And there were just complete laugh out loud moments to this. And I absolutely loved it. And I just thought it was so spectacular. And this book has been out for a couple of years and came out in 2020. I feel like it was a book that was very hyped and talked about, and understandably so now that I finally read it. So it took me a minute to get on board, but I'm so glad that I did. And I love the two of them so much. And I just love that sort of opposites attract kind of a vibe. And I love the fake dating vibe. And any book that brings the romance and the humor and the friendships. And I think it captures a moment in their life where people are getting married and people are having kids and your friend groups are changing and the dynamics of family. And Luke's parents are divorced. He does not really know his father really well. And there's issues around that, and there's emotions around that. And Luke's mom is a riot, and I would absolutely love to hang out with her. But you have a lot of family dynamics, a lot of expectations, living up to expectations, subverting expectations, and really trying to sort of come out of, a shadow maybe of your family, or to stand on your own, to be able to stand up for yourself. So there's a lot that goes into this book, on top of just great romance and great fun. So I absolutely loved it. I was a huge fan of Husband Material as well, but this is definitely my 5-star of the two, and I loved it. I just loved it so much. Another book that I loved so much and binge read is Runtime by Catherine Ryan Howard. So I have quickly become a Catherine Ryan Howard fan. I also read 56 Days this year, which I loved, but this one, this is horror movie Final Girls, just isolated thriller, although not my Agatha Christie isolated thriller comp. Those two are still coming, but I devoured this book. So Catherine Ryan Howard, I feel like in the handful of books of hers that I have read, this is the third of hers that I've read. She always does something a little bit different in her books. So in this book, we are on a film set of a horror movie deep in the forest, miles from anywhere in West Cork. And our lead character is a woman named Adele. She is a former soap star. She's kind of a little bit down on her luck. And she winds up getting this last minute call to be the lead in this movie because the original lead has had to step down. And Adele is like, I'm there, I'm coming, book me a flight, I'm on it. So she winds up showing up to film this horror movie. And when she gets there, it is like life imitating art. Or is it? And what's happening? So it's definitely atmospheric. It's definitely creepy. And the original that I had said before, like Catherine Ryan Howard kind of always does something unique with her books. In this one, we have the actual screenplay interwoven with the book. And I love it. Like, I absolutely love it. So Adele is acting out the movie, and she is there with the cast and crew, and just really weird stuff starts to happen. And I love it. I love a horror movie trope. Final Girls, Riley Sager, and I'm definitely down for it. So I just thought it was so brilliantly well done. I had a great time. I wasn't sure what was going on. It had me guessing. I read it very, very compulsively, and I just thought it was great. So I'm a huge fan of her writing and what she does, and I can't wait to see what she does next, but this one just completely gripped me. Big, fun, very bingey. Another book that I binged, I actually did this on audio, and it's Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. And this book was also so wonderfully fun. This gives me Fool Me Once kind of vibes, in the humor, in a level of, not darkness necessarily, but a little bit weightier, with very strong characters, with very kind of messy but realistic feelings and vibes, with some family dynamics, with some friendship dynamics. And this one surprised me. I did not expect to love this one as much as I did. And some of my friends were reading it, and I definitely had a little bit of FOMO. So I was like, well, I already have it. I need to read this book. And I'm so glad that I did, because it was really, really good. And I had mentioned it in another video. There's so many great things about this book, but there's one scene in particular that had me in tears. Just absolutely brilliant. But in this book, we have Alexis and Daniel. So Alexis was driving home from a funeral and gets stuck in a ditch, and it's like this very remote town, kind of in the middle of nowhere-ish, like an hour away from where she lives. And this guy Daniel winds up pulling up next to her and helping her out. And long story short, there are sparks, and there is some fun, and there is some romance. And despite the fact that they live far away from each other and they live very different lives, they can't sort of deny their chemistry and find a way to be a part of each other's worlds, which is not without its complications. So Alexis is an ER doctor. She has a lot of family pressure on her head. Daniel is a whole lot of things. He's like the mayor of the town. He is a carpenter. He owns a B&B. There's also an age gap difference. He's like 10 years younger than her. And I just loved it so much. I just thought it was really, really smart. I thought there were like definite moments of relatability to this. Again, there are some weightier subject matters to this book, which I also very much enjoyed. There was a lot of emotion to this. And I feel like there were so many moments that I could see happening, I could relate to happening, whether it is a phrase that was said or like a moment. And it was just really, really great fun. So this is the first book I read by Abby Jimenez, and will not be my last. But this is one of those books that really, I feel like, brought up some life questions as well, and really kind of taking stock and reassessing and thinking about where you are and what you're doing and who you're living your life for, and are you living the life you want to live, and are you doing what makes you happy, or are you doing just what's expected of you? And I feel like there's sort of elements that were also in boyfriend material in that way, but just sort of these overarching questions. And I love that in a book. I love a book that is escapist and entertaining and great fun, but also makes me think and really touches me in some sort of a way. And I just had such great fun with this book. So very excited about it. That's why it's on the list. Another dark turn. Let's talk about Ragdoll by Daniel Cole. This book, I did a combination of audio and reading this, which I highly recommend. This book is filled with dark humor, filled with darkness, period. There is definitely some gruesomeness to this book, which honestly is what held me from reading it as long as I did, because I had a little bit of a fear of not being able to handle it. And I did well with it. I feel like I did well with it, but it definitely has some more graphic scenes to it. So the concept of this, and I feel like the concept of the book alone will give you that kind of a feeling. So we are following two detectives. We are following William Wolf Fox and Detective Emily Baxter. So they are partners. They arrive at a crime scene. And here's the thing. It is a body made of the dismembered parts of 6 victims sewn together. A corpse that becomes known as the Ragdoll. Yep, you heard that right. So they need to figure out who the 6 body parts belong to, never mind who done it. And then to complicate matters, because of course, our friend the Ragdoll killer has decided to taunt the police and sends a list to a journalist who happens to be Wolf's ex-wife with another list of names who he plans to kill next, and Wolf is the last name on the list. So we have the ticking time clock, stakes are very high. The dynamics between all of the characters are so great. There is obviously heavy police investigation, which I love. There are personal dynamics in this. I really enjoyed so many different characters. Wolf is so darkly humorous, and the audiobook lends such like the perfect inflection to his voice. And I'm so glad I did the audiobook. So I started to physically read it, and then I was listening to it because it was one of these books that I just wanted to be in at all times. And the audiobook narrator does such a fantastic job of capturing him. And I just loved it. I thought it was so smart. Super unexpected. Like, when you talk about trying to predict what's going to happen next, forget it. Like, I could not predict anything in this book, and I loved it. This is the first in a 3-book series. I did read the second book. I have book number 3. This one to me was just absolutely outstanding, and I loved it. So it definitely does have some graphic descriptions. The Ragdoll killer is kind of a monster, totally a monster, but if you love kind of a monster, super dark humor, police investigation, I think this is just, it's so good. It's so good. And I want to say this was his debut. Look at me missing that. This is his debut too. Man, this could have had a spot on like 3 of the lists. Just so good. So good. I'm gonna keep raising my hands. I'm gonna keep shouting out my hands in the air. Okay, I'm trying to like break up the dark ones with lighter ones, but I'm gonna run out of light books. But next one is my only nonfiction book on the list. And this is Liking Myself Back by J.C. Dupree. So she is the woman behind Damsel in Dior, which started out as a fashion blog, I think like 10 or 12 years ago. And I found her pretty early in her blogging days and really enjoyed her content. So she kind of started just posting like outfit pictures, and it grew over time as she grew over time into a bigger influencer. And I've really enjoyed following her journey. And what this book is so interesting to me. So I feel like if you follow JC, if you know who she is, I think you'll obviously get elevated connections out of this book. But even just as a book, period, I think there's so much like fascination and amazingness to this. And not because it talks like just about this glamorous fashion show product kind of lifestyle, but because we meet this woman who is from a small town in Texas, and how she, from a very young age, was trying to find out who she was. She talks very transparently about the fact that her dad was an alcoholic and how that affected her as a child, how it affected her throughout her adulthood. She talks about her own struggles with mental health, with ADHD. She talks about the kind of what I found really, really fascinating is how, as she became a part of the influencer culture and how she became bigger and bigger, how it really changed her. And she turned into someone that ultimately she really didn't like, and was sacrificing so much of her personal life, so many of her friendships, and really jeopardizing them, jeopardizing her marriage, jeopardizing people in her life. And really she became so obsessed with that life and being like a certain person and coming off a certain way. And it really started to eat her alive. And as someone who has watched from the outside, I never would have guessed this. And she talks about specific moments, which she has a YouTube channel where she did like fashion week vlogs, and they bought a house and they sort of remodeled their house together, and they had a baby and all of these things. And to see the behind the scenes where she was like, this is what you saw, this is what was really happening, was really interesting to see. Not that I never thought that influencer culture, that there was a fakeness to it. You're obviously, so many people are showing you the real of the best moments of their life, but to really hear her talk about what was going on behind the scenes and just how staged everything was, and how much was kept quiet, and how fake a lot of things were, just really interesting to see behind the curtain, and how she was able to sort of finally recognize what she was doing, and that she really did not like the person she was becoming, and fix it. And it was not an overnight fix, and it was not an easy fix, and it was not without more struggles and more pain and more challenges. But I really, really enjoyed this book, and I tabbed it to the high heavens, and I just thought it was great. This is definitely a book I will read again, and I just appreciated the honesty and the transparency of it. And she has her own company. She's made a career of this. And there's a lot of elements that I can no longer relate to in terms of some of like the high-end fashion that she's wearing and can afford, and that lifestyle. But I think her journey of becoming a self-made woman and being able to start her own company, and all the behind the scenes and all the hard work and all the grit and all the long nights and all the sacrifices and the failures and the triumphs and everything. And there's a lot about her family. I just thought it was really, really well done. So again, huge fan of hers, and whether or not you have followed her or not, I think there's just a lot in this book that was really just relatable and understandable. And I just loved it. All these books are on the list because I loved them. Okay, the next book I have in the Agatha Christie and Then There Were None trope is 9 Lives by Peter Swanson. If you guys have been around here, you know I'm a huge fan of his books. And his twist on And Then There Were None, I think, is so brilliant. And I devoured this book as well. So in this one, we have 9 strangers who each receive a letter in the mail. And it says, the envelope is unremarkable. There is no return address. It contains a single folded sheet of white paper. And on that sheet of white paper are 9 names. I tried to do this in every video. And the people who received the letter, their name is on the list. Some people dismiss it. Some people second guess it. And when the book opens, the first person on the list is murdered. And people need to figure out what is going on, who is behind this, how are they connected, are they connected, who is doing this. And it is really, really interesting. Like, what an interesting trope. They are all across the country. These are not like people lured to an island. And I thought it was really, really smart and really, really fun. And he did something, oh, their names are on the back of the book. That was probably easier. But I thought he did such a great job with the twist on this idea of And Then There Were None. And he had me guessing. He surprised me. Peter Swanson always surprises me. And it's funny. There was something I was like, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen. Didn't happen. Totally didn't happen. So I love when the rug gets pulled out from under me. I had talked about this. I think I was talking to Amber from Books and Beaches about this. Like, I love theorizing about what's going to happen and come up with all these wild and crazy things. And this is where it's going to go. And this is what it's going to do. And this person's going to do this and that one's going to do that. And then I'm totally wrong and it goes in a completely different direction. So as much as I feel like I take a little bit of satisfaction, I take a lot of satisfaction when I actually figure something out, I also love being so epically wrong. And I just loved it. I absolutely loved it. I love his writing. I just think he's great. You guys know that. And it's here. It's on the list because it was amazing. And then another book that I talked about just very quickly, Every Summer After. That's really the name of it, by Carly Fortune. I'm calling it the wrong name. I loved this too. So again, in a Fool Me Once, I feel like you are getting my vibe when it comes to the type of romance I like. It is smart. It is funny. It is steamy. It is emotional. It is weighty. This is Ashley Winstead meets Taylor Jenkins Reid meets Christina Lauren meets Abby Jimenez. Like, this is my kind of book. And I really, really enjoyed it. So we get past and present timelines. We get our 2 main characters who meet as teenagers at the summer house where his family lives. Her family comes to visit. It's Percy and Sam. Get their names right. And this book is told over the course of 6 summers and 1 weekend. So in present day, it's been 10 years since they've seen each other. Something happened in the past. And Percy gets a call from Sam's older brother to let her know that their mom has passed away. And he wants to let her know because he knows that Percy's going to want to come to the funeral. And she does. And over the course of that weekend where she is coming for the funeral, she also has to confront everything from her past. And I just loved it so much. And it definitely has that Love and Other Words vibe to it from Christina Lauren. So we do see them as teenagers and we see them in the present day. And I just felt like the awkwardness and the messiness and everything about their relationship felt very relatable. And I was all in with this book. And this was the book that Ashley Winstead mentioned talking about her newest thriller. She said it was Every Summer After, but with serial killers. And I hadn't heard about this book. I didn't know what it was. And when I saw it was a romance, I was like, well, that's interesting. But if Ashley Winstead says to read it, I'm going to read it. And I did. And I loved it. I compulsively read it. It blew me away in the sense that I had no idea it was going to be as amazing as it was. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited for more from Carly Fortune. This is another debut. And I think she nailed it completely. So that's going to do it for part 1 of my favorite books of 2022. So first 11 in the bag. Let me know if any of these were a surprise to you guys, if any of these were on your list, if you've read them, if you plan to read them, all the things. And like I said, part 2 is going to be up tomorrow because I filmed it all today. So you don't have to wait for it. It's already done. And I will see you guys in that video. So thanks for being here. Thanks for hanging out. Thanks for being a part of the Chapter and Converse universe. Sounds so silly. And I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye, everybody.